Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CCA Cinematheque. I'm here, Jason Silverman, here at the studio. Really grateful to have you here. Sorry we started late. We were just phone banking. We were not phone banking. We're just working with Joan Tewksbury, having a little technical problem. We're going to get her on hopefully any minute. We're really grateful to have you here for our Lost Classics Roundtable number 2. Hopefully some of you were with us for the first one where we talked about the wonderful spirit of the Beehive. And it was so fun because we pulled together these 3 people who didn't know each other. And it was kind of random and maybe even a little bit desperate on my part, but I just thought they'd all get along. And now they're all fast friends and having movie nights and spending hours talking about aesthetics and film history. And so I think this is, broken a speed record for becoming CCA tradition, the Lost Classics Roundtables. We will probably figure out sometime in the course of the next hour which our next month's program will be. And we're going to watch a film that is a really striking film from a really amazing period of cinema history, which was Czechoslovakia behind the Iron Curtain, and it was a time of incredible subversive films made against the longest odds with almost no resources. You'll hear more about that. We have all kinds of other great programs coming up soon in the living room. Check www.ccasantafe.org for your living room programs. We've done somewhere above 50 programs now, and we're really enjoying interacting with you guys. Send your questions through chat to us, and we will answer them. And your responses to the film, and even if you're frustrated with the film or confused by it, or are still laughing or crying from the final third act, which is one of the great third acts in cinema. Anyway, we're grateful to have you guys here. We're grateful to be here also with Paul Barnes. He needs a title for the living room because he's been a living room hero, living room patron saint. He's with us for I don't know how.
The man who won't leave the living room.
The man who won't leave the living room. There was a time where I said, Paul, I don't want to overschedule you. I mean, we've got all of these. Can you really do 3 in 1 month? And he said, 3 in 1 month's not enough. Joan is now with us. Yay. Joan Tewksbury is a legendary film and TV writer and director and a novelist and a mentor. All of the bios of our Classic Cinema Council are on our website, so I won't bore you too much. And then Mara Fortes is in Mexico City. I've worked with her for years, and she knows everything about every important movie, and I'm constantly learning from her, and she also makes me laugh. And so we're grateful to have these 3 here together to talk about Milos Forman. Oh gosh, you know what? The first comment is from Rob Stewart. Stop rocking, you're giving me vertigo. That's the second time. That's the second time. Rob, I hear you. I'm going to stay still. I just get excited. So or I have to rock with my with my computer. I will stay still. Thank you for the note. We're going to talk about Milos Forman's film now, and if you guys have any suggestions for classic films, preferably more obscure than less, type them into the chat, and we'll consider them. Who's going first? I'm going to put you guys all on screen, and we can figure out who's next.
I see them, but I see Mara and I see Jason, but I have no.
Joan, you're on. Joan, you're on, and so you just need to click the button next to the little blue button up top there to turn on your camera. Top middle of your screen. It looks like a space pod.
Yeah, next to the microphone.
Next to the 50s microphone. I think it looks like a space pod. Yay, Joe.
Okay. I can't see anybody because my computer is saying I don't have enough power, but that's okay.
Okay, we're gonna look.
I can hear you all, and I know how beautiful you all are. So
okay, I'm gonna disappear and hand it over to whoever's next.
Okay. Do you guys want me to lead it off?
Sure.
Thanks.
The voice from the void.
The voice from the void, yes. Listen, I just want to let people know that, I was asked to do this, and it was intriguing to me because of all of Milos Forman's films, it was the only one of his that I had never seen. And so I thought, well, this is going to be, fun because I do love many of Milos's films. And so I took a look. And what was interesting to me was that I am a huge fan of the Eastern European cinema from the 60s and 70s because of the brave, subversive political content that these filmmakers try to sneak into their films in many intriguing and interesting ways. But I have to say, when I started to watch The Fireman's Ball, after the opening, which I thought was extremely wonderful, the scene with the ladder and burning the poster, it kind of fell off for me. And I was thinking, this seems kind of tame and a little bit slow, and it's not quite grabbing me. But then, as it was going on, it kept getting better and better and better and better. By the end of it, I was totally with the film, and I thought it was really quite extraordinary. And I don't know if audience members had a similar kind of feeling when they were watching the film. But I do think that the film has dated in some ways, only because people probably don't remember the impact of that political era in the 60s and what was going on in Eastern Europe in countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. And in researching it, I actually went back and I found a little Roger Ebert review. He reviewed the DVD release in 2002, and he had this wonderful paragraph, and I thought I'd just read it because I thought it was a perfect way to encapsulate where, what the film is at this point in time. And I'm going to read from this, and this is all in quotes, guys. It's all Roger's words. Is The Fireman's Ball dated today? There you go. That's an interesting question. It no longer borrows energy from its risk-taking, as so many Soviet bloc films did in the 60s and 70s. In those days, any new film from Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, or Czechoslovakia in particular was likely to be a veiled attack, wreathed in the glamour of danger. But The Fireman's Ball hasn't dated as entertainment. Foreman doesn't push his political points, being content to let them make themselves unfold gracefully from the human drama. The movie is just plain funny. And as a parable, it is timeless, with relevance to many times in many lands. Remarkable, he says, how often, when I learn of questionable bureaucratic brainstorms, I think of the fireman moving the farmer's chair closer to the fire. To me, that kind of encapsulates kind of where the film sits in film history at this time. Joan and Mara, I'm just curious, what do you think? Are you there? Joan, Mara?
You're muted, so that it's the blue button next to the other blue button now.
Okay.
The one that
Now.
You're good. You're good now.
Okay. Yes, I go back to Roger Ebert's. The film is funny, and it also, my appreciation for the film is that it was made in spite of what was going on politically and what was going on in the world. And there's an overlap in a funny way with the filmmakers at that particular moment in time, whether they were in the United States fighting the system of the studio system, or whether they were in reality fighting for their lives. There were filmmakers like Milos and like Bob Altman who simply said, screw it, I'm going to dive in here. And Milos's use of the community, when he went to the community, or went into that area. And Paul, you can tell this story better than I. But then using the community as the story, turning it into the story itself,
Right.
is just, I love that. And often, in comparison to Altman, who would often go to the community or go into his community of actors, and so that everybody became a participant in the film in a very communal kind of way.
Right, exactly. Mara, do you want to tell the story of how the film came into being, the genesis of the film, which is so fascinating? Do you know that story well, or do you want me to do it?
She's gone.
Mara, are you there? Did we lose Mara? Well, all right. If Mara's not connected, I'm not sure why not. The interesting story about the genesis of the Firemen's Ball was that Foreman had a great success with his second film, Loves of a Blonde. It was a huge worldwide international hit. And he was very anxious about making his third film and was working on a screenplay with the same two writers he worked with Loves on a Blonde on. And they decided to give themselves some time. They would go off to this remote little village in Czechoslovakia, check into an inn, and be separated from the chaos in Prague, and give it a shot. And while they were there, they started meeting some of the locals at restaurants and bars, and they got invited to an actual fireman's ball. And because they were struggling and kind of had writer's block about this next script they were working on, they all looked at each other and just said, "This is our next film," because they were so intrigued by the craziness that was going on at this, little party that the firemen threw for each other annually, that it was the genesis, for a wonderful possible comedy farce that reflected the country and reflected some of the crazy bureaucracy that was, endemic to living under a communist political system at the time, but one that could be done with a lot of humor and a great deal of affection without being too dangerous to get them entangled with the censorship authorities at the time. So that's how the Firemen's Ball came about. And in fact, when they started to shoot the film, they went back to, again, the local village and recreated it essentially. And many, many of the people who are participants in the film are non-professionals who are not trained actors that Milos hired because of their looks and how authentic they were, using them as close-ups or background actors. And even in some very small little parts, he would give them to some of those locals and have them perform in the film. Milos was very, very fond of using non-professional actors in his films. It was something that remained with him through his entire career, but especially in the Czech period. So that's how the film came about. I wonder if, do you want me to, I think that, there's many viewers perhaps who watched the film and I wonder, I can give a little bit of political background about Czechoslovakia at the time, which I think might, give a little more historical and political context for the film. Shall I go ahead and do that now, folks?
Sure.
Okay. The Firemen's Ball was released in 1967, and it was one of the outstanding films of what is called the Czech New Wave, which was influenced by the French New Wave films, but was far more political than the French movement for good reason. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union took control of much of Eastern Europe following World War II. The takeover was solidified in 1948 when the 9th of May Constitution was passed. All Western-leaning democratic politicians and leaders were eliminated, and absolute power was in the hands of the Czech Communist Party that fully supported the policies of the Soviet Union. The Czech Communist Party maintained cadre lists of those Czech citizens considered to be faithful enough to secure all the important posts in the country's bureaucracy, including military posts, administrative positions, directors of local enterprises, firehouses, social organizations, educational institutions, newspapers, etc., etc. Soviet-style communist policy pervaded every aspect of life in Czechoslovakia. And the Czech economy became a centrally planned command economy, modeled on the Soviet Union. Producer goods were favored over consumer goods, and as a result, consumer goods were lacking in quantity and quality, resulting in a shortage economy in Czechoslovakia that produced corruption, theft, and a black market. In that period of time, approximately 130,000 political dissidents were sent to prisons, labor camps, and mines. Many political leaders and other non-communist parties were executed in the 2 decades after 1948. Human rights activists and religious activists were severely repressed. Mass media in Czechoslovakia was controlled by the Communist Party. All media had to be reviewed and approved by the Government Office of Press and Information. Only one man, Antonin Novotny, served as the first secretary of the Czech Communist Party from 1953 until 1968. This was the society that Miloš Forman was under as his career in filmmaking began. But beginning in the early 1960s and continuing throughout the decade, there was a growing subversive cultural and artistic rebellion against the Soviet style. Novelists, playwrights, and especially the filmmakers of the Czech New Wave began to criticize and satirize this life that they lived under. Given the severe repression, much of it had to be veiled as light comedy, absurdist humor, dramedies in which the subversive elements had to be written and directed between the lines, so to speak, so as not to upset the government censors. The Firemen's Ball was one of these films. Forman's career paralleled the playwright Václav Havel, who wrote his first 2 plays, The Garden Party in 1963 and The Memorandum in 1965. Forman's Loves of a Blonde was made in 65 and The Firemen's Ball in 67. Both Havel's plays and Forman's films were international hits that brought more worldwide attention to the oppression of the Czech people under the control of the Soviet Union. Indeed, at the 4th Congress of the Czech Writers' Union in 1967, the renowned novelist Milan Kundera declared this wave of national cinema as an important part of the history of Czechoslovak literature. Kundera is the author of the great novel, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This cultural expression of freedom helped lead to the election of Alexander Dubček, replacing Novotny as the first secretary of the Czech Communist Party in 1968. Dubček was a reformist who became a catalyst that began what came to be known as the Prague Spring. It was a period of political liberalization and mass protest in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. Dubček, who promoted socialism with a human face, attempted to grant additional rights to Czech citizens by partially decentralizing the economy, encouraging democratic reforms, and loosening the restrictions on the media, speech, and travel. But the Prague Spring was to be short-lived and only lasted from January of 1968 until August of 1968. That August, the Soviet Union clamped down hard on Czechoslovakia, sending more than 500,000 troops and thousands of tanks into the country. The Soviets installed a hardline communist loyalist, Gustav Husak, as first secretary and arrested Alexander Dubček. Husak remained in power from 1968 until 1980. By then, Miloš Forman had fled the country and began his career in the United States. Forman really only made 3 films in Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel was blacklisted under the new communist regime. He was placed under surveillance by the secret police and imprisoned many times, the longest nearly 4 years between 1979 and 1983. The innovative, subversive works of the novelist playwrights and the filmmakers of the Czech New Wave, including The Firemen's Ball, were banned under this new hardline communist regime. So that was the world in which The Fireman's Ball and Loves of a Blonde were created by Foreman and these other incredibly talented Czechoslovakian filmmakers. So it was an extremely difficult life for many of these people who really were really struggling to attain some freedom and attain a measure of democracy back into their society, which it was very difficult for them to do. So anyway, that's kind of the political background that Foreman was working under. And I think, knowing those kinds of hardships and constraints, I mentioned earlier, I thought that The Fireman's Ball seemed a little tame. But when you realize, how dangerous it was to be so overtly critical of the Soviet society and the Soviet party, Communist Party, these little wonderful, humorous, satirical looks at the bureaucracy represented by the Fireman's Ball Committee, it was to us now it might seem rather trivial or minor, but given what they were facing politically in that country, most critics, especially in the West, read The Fireman's Ball as a parable about the oppression under the Soviet system. And so when you watch the film, keeping that in mind, some of these incredible, crazy comic moments where everything seems to fall apart and, nutty solutions lead only to more problems, and the wacky infighting between these people and the inability to get anything done, anything accomplished, or, the fact that the thievery in the society was such a big thing that the lottery table where the prizes keep disappearing from take on a much stronger import when you see it in that kind of a light. They're small little things, but they stand out overall. Mara, Joan, any?
Mara.
Yes. Can you hear me? I think I need to turn my video off because I become frozen.
Oh, okay. We can hear you now.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I see that someone posted in the chat that they thought this conversation was going to be about the Fireman's Ball in the context of the current political fiasco in the U.S. And I think in movies always kind of tread at least two temporalities. One is, of course, the time in which they were made and maybe the time they portray, but they're also about the time when we watch them again. And
yes.
At least in my case, I'm in Mexico, and I think I completely identified with this, the figure of this completely inept committee of bureaucrats who think they have authority, and the scene of people watching the house burn down, that's kind of like a metaphor for the country burning down, and people spectating. It definitely resonates for today's time as well. But I think it's important to look at it in the specificity of the political context that you're giving us, Paul. And I was wondering, I have some interesting facts also about Miloš Forman's upbringing that I think might fit in this might fit well with the political context you just described.
Yes.
So I think there's this pattern in Miloš Forman's life where things happen in an untimely fashion, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst. But he was born in 1932, and he was born to a teacher family, but both his father was very much involved in the resistance to the Nazi occupation. And when he was about 8 years old, his father was arrested by the Gestapo. And, there's conflicting stories about whether he died in an interrogation by the Gestapo or if he died in a concentration camp. But he lost his father. And then very shortly afterwards, he lost his mother, who was also arrested when she was named, when they interrogated, I think, a local store owner. And so he ended up kind of, his childhood sort of living with his uncles and family friends, and eventually ended up in this boarding school that was for war orphans. And it was a really interesting school because it kind of became this PR thing for all the political parties to donate to this school. So it actually became a really good school. It had the best teachers, and so then of course everyone wanted their kids to be in there. So it didn't want it to be just a school for orphans. And so the way Milos describes it in an interview is that his school was 1/3 war orphans, 1/3, the sons or the children of the communist elite, and then 1/3 the children of the most powerful capitalists. And so I think it is there that he became friends with Ivan Passer and Václav Havel, who later became president. But it was just such an interesting mixture of kids. And I think he got kicked out of the school because he and a couple others bullied the kid of one of the son of one of the most powerful figures in the regime. I think they peed on him or something horrible. But anyway, he got kicked out, and then actually he talks about the films that impacted him when he was a kid, and he saw, of course, all the silent comedians, Chaplin and Keaton, and but then those films, eventually were banned because they were films from the West. And then he recalls this one silent film. It was a silent film version of a popular opera, Czech opera. And he recalls this moment where the audience started singing along to the faces on screen. So I think it's interesting because it was like this experience that ignited for him the power that film could have. And then then he went to the film school, the FAMU, the Prague Film School, and he was there with this generation of filmmakers that became the Czech New Wave. But I think it's interesting. What's interesting about the Czech New Wave is that this is, to me, as opposed to maybe the French New Wave, the directors that are part of the Czech New Wave, they're very different in terms of style. So for me, it's like a New Wave that's more united by this attitude to opposing the types, the propaganda films or the socialist realist films.
Yes.
And also, and especially this idea that, those films show this kind of idealized version of the future man, the working man. And for them, it was important to actually tell the stories and the reality that was close to them. So anyway, just wanted to add that those pieces of information.
Yeah.
I think. Yep.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Joan.
I think that one of the things that resonates to all of us and why this film holds up is the behavior of the film. There will always be husbands and wives. There will always be boys and girls trying to sneak under the table to have a moment of privacy in a public setting and falling in love. And there will always be mothers who want to know what the hell is going on in a beauty contest. And more than that, the what he captures, and I go back to the sort of parallels with Altman in a way, in capturing human behavior without a lot of discussion about dramatic point of view or arcs or any of that in the storytelling, but just letting people be who they are, and with a very fluid camera. And Paul, as you and I have discussed, it could have used you as an editor, but still, you were part of the humanity of this event, so that when everything turns on an emergency, we suddenly drop from all the excitement of human getting together, and you have to do something about this emergency that is taking place. Right. And so I think, and Milos continued to have the real gift of observation and connection with, as you said, with real people. And so that is probably the reason that that his films just resonate, no matter what they are, they will resonate to us forever because we can identify.
Yeah. Let's look at a clip now that exemplifies a little bit of his directorial style. Um, uh, Jason, can you play clip number 2? That's the clip where the mother comes into.
Postavte se blíž k té stěně.
Neboj, budou lepší, neboj.
Dobrý den. Já jsem maminka a jdu se na vás podívat a chci se vás zeptat, co je na tom pravda. Holka mě pořád bájí o nějaký královně krásy a já si myslím, holka je mladá, že jo, neskušená, aby někde nenaletěla, tak se jdu zeptat, přesvědčit. No prostě, co je na tom pravdy.
To je hezký, že jste se přišla podívat. Můžete mít radost, že byla vybraná.
No tak když se vám líbí, tak nechám na vás, že jo.
Jen klid, matko, všecko je solidní.
No a jistota je jistota. O čeho máme muže, jo?
Jen nemějte žádný obav. Podívejte se na nás, pak bychom mohli. Že...
No tak já vám ji zavolám. Ano, kde tě mám? Kde jsi, holka, pojď sem. Tady vám ji vedu. Holka je hubená, jak když zube cvečky. No ale když nechce jít, kdo pak za to může? Že jo, tak se tady hezky postav, narovnej se hezky. No. Taky tady máte.
Ona se nejde, člověče. Ona se nejde. No tak to je dobrý, maminko, už můžete odejít, jo?
A tak mě tady nechte, já jsem zvědavá, já bych to chtěla taky vidět, co bude dál.
Nemusíte mít obavy, tady se nic nestane.
A vám se taky nic nestane, když mě tady necháte?
Dále!
No tak dále!
Oh, my Lord.
Yes.
Joan, do you want to talk about that a little bit? You picked that scene.
Oh, I know. I do love it because it is all the absolute embarrassment of the adolescent girls who both want to be gorgeous and be beauty contestant participants and hating the way they look, and the men who are hoping for something really spectacular aren't quite getting it, as most especially because the mother is standing there. I mean, it's very obvious in all of that. But what he captures as the girls keep coming in until finally one of the girls decides to come in a bathing suit is the absolute discomfort of everybody in the room. And he does it in a very spectacular way without ever talking about the discomfort in the room. And also the prurient kind of quality. Milos is wonderful about stacking horror and humor and the complexities of our emotions all in the same frame, as it were, or in the same scene. Mara, you had thoughts about this scene as well.
Yes, I was thinking about how, throughout the film, there's this kind of disarticulation of figures of authority and power. So, we see these uniformed men who think they have authority and power, But then that scene where the mom walks in, you know, she's clearly the center of gravity and she's clearly controlling that whole space.
Yes.
And then I thought also of just the previous scenes where they're trying to recruit the women, how it's also the women that say, write this name down, no, cross it off, you know, like they are choreographing everything. And then they are the reason why they can't, you know, that the whole ball is a fiasco because they refuse to participate and go on stage. So it's like, in a way, they are shaping the events of the night.
Right. It's also striking to me. It's again, you can really see in Milos's casting. I think the majority of the firemen are non-professionals. The leader of the firemen, the bald man sitting at the desk, he's a wonderful actor who actually had a part in Months of a Blonde. So he mixes these non-professionals with the professionals in a really wonderful way. And Milos at one point talked about directing non-professionals and saying, you know, you can't just write all the script dialogue down and expect non-professionals to remember it all or to deliver it in a way. And he said what he'd like to do with his script writers is lay out what the scene is about and give the kind of broad directions of what it would be about. Tell the non-professionals, this is what you have to do, and then think about what you might say in this situation. So he involved these non-professionals kind of in the creative process of imagining themselves in this scene, in this world that he's created, and then let them react to it in their own way. And I'm not 100% sure, but I wonder if the mother was one of those talented, you know, non-professionals, kind of, you know, secretly talented non-professionals that Milos loves so much. And he spotted her in town, asked her to be in the film, and then told her what the scene was about, that she was supposed to watch over her daughter and make sure no hanky-panky was going to go on with the firemen, and that she herself didn't come up with some of those lines. I also, you know, again, what's striking about it is that, you know, the humanity of these people, you know, even though there's this foolishness and foibles that are going on, Milos gets such a great kick out of it. He has such an affection for these people, even if they're horribly incompetent or if they have potentially awful ulterior motives. It's like, you know, there's this affection for humanity that always comes through in Milos's films that's really quite striking, especially when you think about, you know, the weight of, you know, the crazy bureaucracy that most of these people had to live under. Milos could make light of it. He could bring the humor out, and he could bring out the humanity, which is really striking, I think, in his directorial skills. Should we look at another clip?
Yes.
Let's go, Jason, if we can go to clip number 3. And this is kind of the centerpiece of the film, which is the burning of the fireman's house, the farmer's house.
Všichni ven! Ven všichni! Prosím vás, ho tady někdo podržte! Počkejte na stanu, počkejte na místo! Stůjte, dělo, počkejte!
Platit? Mladý muži, co jsem měl? 1 limonádu. Dechněte na mě. 75 halířů. Další, prosím, pěkně platit.
Nenechte ho tady stát! Dědo,
Stejněte, dělo, stejněte pomalu. Oni jděte na stranu, kousek.
Teď já tady stojím proto, aby neviděl, jak mu hoří barák. Taky ho na to necháte koukat.
Otočte ho aspoň. Jde to blbý. Tak se dělo, otočte. Stejněte si, dělo, stejněte, pomalu. Teď se tam stejně dívá.
No nedívte se, teď mu hoří barák. Dědo, není vám zima.
Půjdeme blíž k ohni, ne?
Tak jenom vstaňte, jdeme blíž.
Horko, člověče, tady už se nějak pálí.
Tak, dědo, posaďte se už. Tady vám snad nebude zima. Ergo, tam, nekoukejte tam pořád.
Dědo, já si půjčím váš stůl. Děvčata, nedívejte se po ohni a jedem. Tak, dej se píl, vyndej ty kelímky. Sem mi dej tu slivovici. Tak, otvírák tam není, otvírák.
Oh my word! That scene is so extraordinary to me. It's, you know, so much. It's like where the film all coalesces in a way. You know, the incompetence. The fire truck gets stuck in the snow. They can't get the hoses up to the house. They start using shovels to try to put out the fire. You know, people rush, but they're just watching. They're not helping particularly, or there's nothing they can really do to help. It's kind of a helpless sort of situation. Meanwhile, the cafe owner is trying to take advantage of everybody who left the cafe without paying their bill. He's trying to collect their bills. He's smelling their breath. He borrows the table to set up a bar while this is going on, you know. And the great thing with the poor old farmer of, you know, getting a chair for him to sit down, you know, and then thinking he's so cold that they move him closer to the fire, you know, which goes back to, you know, that great line that Roger Ebert mentioned, that whenever he thinks of, you know, questionable bureaucratic brainstorms, I think of the firemen moving the farmer closer to the fire as the solution. And then at the very end, there's that wonderful choir that comes in, and you see these close-ups of people's faces watching the fire. It actually goes on a little bit longer. But, you know, again, Milos's mastery of comedy and drama is so well done here, because you're in a situation of danger. You know, fire is falling off the roof, almost hits a fireman. You know, this farmer's house is burning to the ground, and they can't put it out. Everybody's probably thinking about how it's destroyed his life. And those faces reflect a kind of sadness and helplessness that, again, works as a kind of metaphor for life under the communist system in Czechoslovakia. I mean, it's very subtle and very quiet, but it's strikingly effective to me. And that's why I think the film does attain a kind of power, because as it goes along, the comic moments are mixed with these moments of pathos that suddenly make you think, you know, a little deeper about these people's situations.
And it's always the great thing about stacking information in a frame, because that's like life. I mean, the most disastrous thing can be happening on the street corner, but, you know, a young couple just got engaged over here, and so they're, you know, having a meeting with friends. So I think what's interesting about these men's lives, these directors, so many of them had been either, as Altman was a pilot in the Air Force here, Milos had undergone incredible strife in terms of his life, but they had lived a full life, full of all kinds of life. So their ability to stack it in a frame or in a scene gave you everything all at once, which I think is quite wonderful. And sometimes we get it now in movies, but most of the time we're sort of led in a singular direction. So it's so nice to have a frame where you can pick and choose where your focus for your attachment, for your emotions go. You can see the film 20 times, and every time it'll be different.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Shall we show the next clip, Mara, which was one you picked out, which is about the head of the firehouse talking about the unfortunate incident? Shall we look at that first and then talk about it after, or do you want to comment on this? Oh, your microphone is off.
Oh, oops. No, I wanted to comment actually because I think there's some interesting questions from the audience.
Okay.
In the chat, and I think it's a good scene to relate them to. There's just I'm going to summarize because there's several comments, but one is a challenge to this idea of Milos Forman being as subversive as he and we are maybe making him up to be. Someone in the audience says he was actually very privileged because he was able to travel. And I think, that's a good point, because if you compare his career to the other filmmakers of the Czech New Wave that were not able to leave the country, their career shaped up very differently. But I think in terms of the censorship context of this film, what did happen is, and I'm not sure if we mentioned this already, so sorry if I repeat it, but that it wasn't like a top-down censorship that this film cannot be shown. It was actually more perverse and softer. And what the regime did at the time was they would plant people in the audience and show the film to that audience. And then the planted person would get up at the end of the screening and say, this film is an insult to the working men, blah, blah, blah. And so then the regime could come back and say, look, it's just, the audience just doesn't like your film. So, there's nothing we can do. And with this film in particular, the regime had this great idea of showing it to the audience of the town where they shot it. And there's a question from the audience of like, what was the reaction of the community to the film? And the governance plan actually totally backfired, because what happened is they had the same thing. They planted someone in the audience at the end of the screening. This person got up and said, this is such an insult to the integrity of our great firemen brigade. And then what happened is some of the firemen in the audience, stood up and said, what are you talking about? That totally happened to us. Remember when our truck got stuck and you were really drunk and we weren't able to get there on time? So I think, it ties into this idea of the fact that, to me, the more subversive part is these parts of pathos. And when you really see real faces and you can see that there's stories behind each of those faces, because that's the mirror to the audience, and that ties into the mission of creating real stories that people can identify with. So anyway, just wanted to address those those questions and use this scene too.
No, good. Are there any other questions? I can't see the chat, Amara. Are there any others that we should address?
There's an interesting point too about, and I thought about this too, why the films from the Czech New Wave were so popular in the U.S. Because Loves of a Blonde and was nominated for an Oscar, and this was too. And it's interesting to think of maybe because the kind of anti-communist regime sentiment in these films was concordant with the ideology of the U.S. at the time, or something like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm just throwing it out there, but there's a reason why those were so popular in the U.S. at the time.
Well, it's true. Again, going back to the time in the 60s and my own recollections, I was certainly drawn to these films. The 60s was also a time of kind of re-examining communism, I think, for a lot of American intellectuals and a lot of American students. The actual horrors of Stalin and what was happening behind the Iron Curtain and in the Soviet Union hadn't all completely come out yet. We didn't really know a lot about all the purges and the famines that were caused. And there was also a kind of romanticism to communism and socialism that was being explored by a lot of students and American intellectuals at the time. And so when filmmakers in the Eastern European bloc began to make these films that were showing what it was really like behind the Iron Curtain, I think it was very appealing to a lot of intellectuals in the West and to students who were studying this, because many people were drawn to aspects of socialism and communism and had idealized the Soviet Union and life under that political system in many ways. And so these films were very revealing to them about what it was actually like. And we admired the bravery of these filmmakers, somehow being able to produce these and then get them, outside of the Iron Curtain and shown in international situations. So it was a bit of an eye-opener for many people, and I think that's why they were quite popular, because of that fact. And I think they helped to change a lot of people's minds about really what communism was all about, what was really happening in the Soviet Union, and really question, that political system. Mara, do you have any comments, or Mara's frozen again? Mara, are you with us?
We show her clip.
Yeah, Jason, can we go ahead and show clip number 4?
Prosím, ticho!
Přátelé, věnujte mi chvilku pozornost. Stala se nám taková nepříjemná věc. Nechci to tady roztahovat a nechci z toho taky dělat aféru. Někdo nám zebral z tomboly několik cen. Nemůžeme pokračovat. My teďko zhasneme. Bude tma. V této nastalé tmě ten, kdo to zcizil, to tam odnese. No ne, ještě nezačínej, ještě ne. Ještě jsem nedomluvil. Prosím, no nezačínejte.
Mara, are you with us? Mara?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. That was a scene that Mara picked out to show, that clip. Do you want to talk about that, Mara?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking throughout the film of this idea of the collective, because partly because it's a film where you don't have, main characters. You have the committee and basically the audience, and these moments where people become individualized within the crowd. But I was thinking too of this recollection that Milos Forman had of seeing this silent film and people singing along to it. And to me, this scene where they turn off the lights is maybe a nod to a cinema audience. It's like, the people who are in the crowd in the dark, and the total anarchic energy that happens in the film, and the confrontation, because the committee kind of accuses everyone of being thieves, and those close-ups of the faces where they're really rejecting that categorization. I don't know, it just feels like those are the glimmer of hope in the film, is that these moments of solidarity that happen between people in the crowd that is not on stage. And I also thought a lot of about stages in the film, because the kind of the momentum of the narrative is who gets to be on stage, who's reluctant to be on stage, who automatically walks towards the stage. So you have the kind of the president figure who just wants to get on stage and claim his his award. And then you have the women who are very reluctant to get on stage. And then you have the table of the raffle prizes. That's another mini stage where things just keep disappearing. Yeah. And I read somewhere that the Czech term for turning out the lights from this film became used later as a term to talk about corporate crime. This idea of people stealing when the lights are out.
Yes.
Very good.
I know. And I love the fact that the firemen are saying, we'll put the lights out and you can put the prizes back, but when the lights come up, more things are missing. And then the second time he does it, the fireman who's supposed to be in charge of protecting the prizes throws the head cheese on the table, to reveal that he himself and his wife actually stole one of them.
Right, and then he gets scolded for being seen putting it back, right?
Exactly. He's scolded for right. I know. The twisted comedy that they came up with in this regard is really quite wonderful. Mara, you picked out another scene, which is when the former fireman president gives his acceptance speech for his gift. Should we play that and then talk about it after?
Sure.
Okay. Jason, that's number 5.
Předsedo, musíš nám prominout, že jsme se trochu zpozdili. Ale však ty víš, jak to u nás po takovém požáru vždycky vypadá. Ale tím víc to bude z lásky a od srdce. Že chlapci? Ano. Přidávám ti dárek, který ti jistě právem náleží. Prosím, předvezmi si ho.
Přátelé, děkuju upřímně váženému požárnímu sboru. Jehož jsem byl dlouhá léta předsedou a nyní již jen jako vysloužilý předseda. A vám všem za tento krásný dar, za toto vysoké vyznamenání. Jsem nevýslovně šťasten, že na sklonku mého života se mi dostalo takové vysoké pocty. Děkuju vám ještě za vzácnou pomoc, kterou jste mi často poskytli při vykonávání mých prací a různých úkolů. Tím jste mě právě přispěli k docílení takového vysokého vyznamenání, že mi byl věnován tento cenný dar. Krásný.
Oh my God, that's so fabulous.
Yeah.
Mara, why did you choose that scene? What's so striking to you about it?
Well, I think there's this sort of also this contrast between the speeches and the vacuousness of the words in the speeches. There's that one moment where the guy keeps forgetting the words for like solidarity and generosity, and it's the audience that actually throws those words into his mouth. But
right.
It's also an interesting scene because I showed it to my class and I laughed a lot, but some people see it as very, very dark, and very, very tragic. And and it's true, you know, it's like there's to me the funny part is that there's that you know, they first of all they forget the one reason why they were throwing this ball, which is to give the award to their honorary president.
Right.
But also just the ceremoniousness of his speech. You know, you can tell that he has his speech prepared, and then all to open the box and be awarded with nothingness. You know, with oblivion, right. Basically.
The axe has been stolen.
Right.
The axe has been stolen. But you also really feel the dynamic between, you know, you actually see, for the first time, you see a like tender emotion in the members of the Firemen committee when they listen to his speech. So I thought it was the kind of perfect crystallization of these two, you know, the kind of slapsticky comic aspect of the film, and then also the pathos and tenderness that it brings to the fore.
No, absolutely. I mean, Foreman's affection for people is definitely there, right? You know, all through that scene for sure. I love the way that he shoots the firemen sort of tentatively sneaking back into the empty party, and the long shot he uses for you know, the honorary president who rises, and then when they run out of the room, he goes to a medium shot and he slowly sinks back down into his chair. I mean, it's very much like silent comedy to me. It's a moment that Keaton could have done, or a moment that Harry Langdon could have done. Right. You know, so that kind of wonderful, quiet, comic touch that Foreman often had in his films was very much present in that moment.
It's also, it's very much in the movement, in the dance of it. It's like a highly choreographed ballet in that, and it's also that there cannot be an individual. If one is going to do something, they all have to do something.
Yes.
And they all have to come back, and they all have to come forward. And in those wide shots, you are able to see just in not only the faces, but the body language of those men. But also, as you say, it pulls us into the pathos of their lives. It's just so tiny. Oh.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's really quite wonderful. Yeah. Joan chose one more sequence, which is rather short. Can we do number 6, Jason? Oh, my word. That sequence is so beautiful to me. It's like poetic comedy. You know, it's hilarious. It's heartbreaking. It's, but you know, it's such a beautiful way to end the film. I think, you know, with the farmer crawling into bed with one of the firemen who's been left behind at the scene. You know, his whole house is destroyed. You know, but he seeks comfort with a fellow man, and then it starts to snow.
Yes. And also, after all that.
Oops. Joan, you cut out there. Joan, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, what were you going to say?
After all of that excitement and hilarity, and it is the morning, there's no better morning after scene than that. It is the absolute, you're cold, you're hungry, all of those kinds of things gathered into one image. But the image, just the image itself, is so starkly beautiful. And as you say, it's heartbreaking, and at the end of this film, to have that kind of silence is, it lets us take in what's happened for the hour and a half that we've been there. So,
I know. And it does leave you on a note of real melancholy. I think it's quite sad. And that's when I think it really sinks in on you, the kind of life.
Yes.
The film represents the kind of life that the people have to live under this kind of a system, even though it's all done in a very comic, light way. At the end of the film, it has some real deepness to it. It has some real sharpness to it.
And it's also, I became obsessed with trying to figure out what all the objects were that surround the bed, because there's a crucifix and there's a sewing machine.
All of his possessions.
In some ways it's
yeah,
his possessions that's like a portrait of a life.
Yes.
But yeah, I was thinking if they had maybe some symbolic meaning, or because he also prays when his house is burning down, right?
Yes.
Sort of sense of prayer, and in that scene almost feels like how in musicals, when the musical numbers start, it's like a different atmosphere. You're in a parallel world. It almost feels like you are in a kind of more fairy tale.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, agreed. So, Jason, you came on. I guess you want us to shut up. Are you asking us to stop? Jason, are you there?
Can't hear you.
Jason's not there.
Here we go. I am here. No, I never, ever want you guys to stop. I mean, it's
right.
I miss seeing you, and this platform can be slightly finicky. There's Mara. It's Paul. Show up to your beautiful face again. Try.
No, my computer is just saying my connection is low at the moment, so you only get my voice, unfortunately.
All right. Well, you have a beautiful voice. I want to just recognize one more comment. Tim Hunter, who knows what he's talking about in terms of directing, mentioned in the chat how difficult it is to stage scenes with so many people in the frame at all times and have it seem so natural. And I think that's really one of the things. And I love Joan talking about the kind of community filming. And there's actually not that many movies where a group is the main character. You've got that Potemkin, and you've got there's a handful of them, and it's one of the greats, and I think that's one of the wonderful things that never happens in American cinema. And so the collective, it's the opposite collective is what you have in Battleship Potemkin. But anyway, I'm not going to go on because that's for you to do. I'm a part-time member of the council. I want to say thank you guys, and apologies for the technical problems. And you guys are so brave to hang in there and wrestle with it with us. The conversation is so rich, and I hope that anyone who didn't get a chance to see the film, you can still click on and watch it. It's still live for a few more days, so watch it. It's wonderful, and it's more wonderful after hearing these guys talk about it. Paul mentioned there is a little bit of it takes a little while to get going, but once it does, it just gains force and gains force and gains force. Yes. And that last scene is so lovely and haunting and ambiguous. And so enjoy that. Our next programs, you guys, we didn't come up with our next film, but we'll announce that together. Sometime in November, we'll get the council back together if they're all willing.
Okay.
and
Jason, could I do a tiny, quick political postscript for Czechoslovakia?
Yes.
Because I basically ended when, the Soviet Union took over again. Okay.
Yeah. Let me just do one thing first, and I'll let you have that last word. If you like what you saw tonight, I am going to post the opportunity for you guys to donate. Just click on the donate now button, and it'll open in a new window. You can send us some support. We're providing these programs for free to try to keep the community spirits up. But anyone who can't afford to do so, feel free to pitch in. We want to keep this program going strong. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Paul.
Okay, just a quick aftermath in terms of what happened in Czechoslovakia for those of you who may not know. The communist rule lasted until the end of 1989. And as the Soviet Union was crumbling, the Velvet Revolution, as it was called, took place in Czechoslovakia. It was a huge popular uprising against communism, communist rule, and it was led by students and older dissidents like Václav Havel. It was thankfully a bloodless revolution. The result was an end to one-party rule, the dismantling of the command economy, and the conversion to a parliamentary republic. On December 28th, Gustav Husek appointed the first largely non-communist government since 1948. He then resigned. Alexander Dubček, who had been the communist leader during the Prague Spring, was then elected the leader and returned to power when he was elected Speaker of the federal parliament. And Václav Havel, the playwright, was made president of the Czech Republic on December 29th, 1989. In June of 1990, Czechoslovakia held its first democratic election since 1946. So there is a bit of a happy ending to this story. And at the time, Milos Forman was still living in the United States, quite successfully making films. He would go on to release one of his best films, The People vs. Larry Flint, in 1996, a film about the controversial legal case to protect the First Amendment rights of the publisher of Penthouse magazine, which I happen to think is one of Milos Forman's finest films. And if you haven't seen it, you should catch it because it's hilarious and wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you and good night. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon. Just a quick note is a week from Sunday, we're going to have a special program on Mabel Dodge Lujan with a group of wonderful panelists. And we're going to show a short documentary. And then you guys, our council will love this. Come join this one. We are going to revisit the wonderful film Bamako from, I think, 2006, which is a fantastic political, kind of strange fairy tale set in Mali. And we're going to actually have that as kind of an open program where you can ask questions in person. That's going to be me and my creative partner, Samba Gajigo, who is a great scholar of African cinema. So you will enjoy that. That is 2 weeks. That's Friday the 13th, 2 weeks from tonight. So we'll hope to see you guys there. And we will give you news about the next event with our esteemed Lost Classics Cinema Council. Thank you, Mara, Joan, and Paul. This is my favorite. I wish we could do it every night. Be safe, everyone. Don't forget to vote, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.